In July 1973, the world came crashing down for some teenagers when David Bowie announced the death of Ziggy Stardust. The rest of the world didn't care much, and yet, this was a foreboding time for a lot of people, a time when it felt like the world is not as it was. From May to August, the US Senate held hearings to investigate suspicions that the government abused its power and sent its agents to spy on and inflict damage upon its political rivals in what became known as the Watergate scandal. Although he never mentioned it, we can assume that the mood caused by Watergate lay heavily on Bowie's mind when he started to plan his next move, and played a major part in influencing the direction his new project took. For the counterculture, of course, it came as no shock that the Nixon administration was playing dirty, because they were feeling it for several years now. But in 1973, it suddenly became apparent that these tactics were expanded and turned against people who were in the political mainstream as well. For some, it was a wake-up call that made them realize that even democratic governments might act dictatorial if we don't keep them in check. It is reasonable to assume that Bowie, whose latest album, Aladdin Sane, used American landscapes as templates to paint a frightening vision of the future on, took Watergate as an omen of the world we are headed towards. Until now, he was concerned mainly with the counterculture and the direction that it was taking. In his 1969 record Signet Committee, he contemplated what would happen if the revolution actually did succeed, and concluded that it would lead to a totalitarian society. But by 1973 it was obvious that the 60s revolution failed, and a new sort of fear took hold over his work. Panic in Detroit was the first to express it. The revolutionary hero of the song is portrayed as a ridiculous failure, but the havoc he and his cohorts have wrought is enough to give the authorities due cause to take measures, which followed none too soon. By the end of the record, the guitars turn into police sirens, and we can imagine the rock and roll revolution ending up in the formation of a police state. Bowie's fear, expressed in subsequent records and interviews, was that the upheaval caused by the counterculture and the uber-liberal values it was espousing would only strengthen the existing power structures and make them more repressive. This was what was going on through Bowie's mind at the time, but, as always, he dressed it up in imagery concocted from a mixture of borrowed sources and his own imagination. If Watergate was a portent of the future, then the relevant sources would be science fiction works that describe a future authoritarian state, and first and foremost of those, of course, would be George Orwell's classic novel, 1984. Bowie's initial intent, reportedly, was to make an album based on Orwell's book, but difficulties in obtaining the legal rights made him change the plan and write his own story, ultimately resulting in the album Diamond Dogs. The finished product hints at its origin. Almost every track on the album contains passages that seem to refer to 1984, but there is a lot more going on in them besides, and it seems that they started out being closely related to the novel, but then evolved into something else. Dodo, however, did not make the album, and remained in its original form, closer to 1984 than to Diamond Dogs. As such, it provides a valuable snapshot of Bowie's mind, just before it was taken over by the world of Hunger City.
Now we can talk in confidence. Did you guess that we've been done wrong? Lies jump the queue to be first in line. Such a shameless design.
The first verse throws us into a world where we live in a design created by others, a design based on lies. Furthermore, it seems that we have no freedom of speech, no right to come out and say that this design is deceitful. We are constantly under surveillance, and we need to find places where we can talk in confidence if we want to say what's really on our mind.
Thinks this well screened from the man at the top. It's a shame that his children disagree. They coolly decide to sell him down the line. That is brainwashing time.
The man at the top is a very 60s phrase, and it places the story in the here and the now. The rest of the verse, however, reminds us of the world described in 1984, where children are encouraged to rat on their parents if they show signs of discontent, and the parents are then taken away and brainwashed to become model citizens. We would like to believe that our world is different, but is it?
He's a Dodo, no, didn't hear it from me. He's a Dodo, no, didn't hear it from me.
It seems that the first two verses, and the chorus, are all about the same person. In the first verse, he is the speaker, and he thinks he can talk in confidence, believing that he is hidden from the authorities. But the second verse switches to a narrator voice that tells us that this man was not as safe as he thought, and ended up being turned in by his children. And the chorus tells us that he is now dead. The narrator, fearing the same end, uses a metaphor, Dodo, as in as dead as the dodo, to tell us what is really going on, but denies being the one who said it.
She's quite enthralled with the childhood of yore, when a unit was a figure, not a she. When lovers chose each other, now the clerk's a Jew, another memo to screw. She's a Dodo, no, didn't hear it from me. Oh, she's a Dodo, no, didn't hear it from me.
Now we really feel ourselves in the world of 1984. It is a state where people are not perceived as persons but as units, parts of the machine. Furthermore, it is a state that forbids relationships based on love and decides for its citizens whom they will marry. And when this woman rebels against it in the name of individualism and true love, she too becomes a dodo. And she's not just dead, but erased. The memos are changed so that her existence is wiped out of memory. In Orwell's future vision, the totalitarian party retains its grip on every aspect of reality by constantly rewriting the past to make it fit its current doctrines. Anything that doesn't fit is erased from all documents, and thus never existed. Thus, there is no truth to rely upon to criticize a situation and offer alternatives. The only truth that exists is what the authorities claim to be true at the moment. This is all very Orwellian, but I believe there is also self-criticism here. Wasn't it Bowie who taught us that everything changes, and what is true today is not the same as what will be true tomorrow? Until now, he was teaching us how to rejoice in this situation, how to stop looking for an eternal truth, but rather live your life in accordance with these changes, and be truly free. Now, he sees the negative side of it, showing that it can be abused in the service of exerting dictatorial power. Until now, his art criticized others, presenting them with a mirror image to show them the folly of their ways. Now, he turns the mirror on himself. If this Orwellian vision will come to pass, he will share the blame for its formation.
Can you wipe your nose, my child, without them slotting in your pile of photographs? Can you sleep alone at night, wake to find the scorching light of neighbor Jim has come to turn you in? Not the Dodo, no, didn't hear it from me. Another Dodo, no, didn't hear it from me.
The finale brings us back to our world, as the narrator now talks in second person as if he is addressing us. Basically, he asks us if we are sure that we are not already living in an Orwellian society, spied on at all times, and in danger of being picked up by the authorities at any moment. Dodo, as we see, remains very close to 1984, but already dresses it in Bowie's unique imagery, turning it into a reflection on the current state of things, and on Bowie's own responsibility for it. In the coming months, Bowie would weave some more strands into the narrative and end up with an entirely original story known as Diamond Dogs.